What happens when the most feared predator in the galaxy becomes the most unlikely savior? When every species in the known universe trembles at the mention of humanity, but one desperate alien queen discovers that behind our terrifying reputation lies something far more dangerous to our enemies: our capacity for mercy. This is the story of Captain Marcus Chen, whose single act of kindness toward a dying enemy queen would reshape the balance of power across 3 galactic sectors. In a universe where humans are known as the silent death and the persistent ones, one alien ruler learned that our greatest weapon isn't our technology or our ruthlessness, it's our unexpected ability to choose compassion over conquest. Prepare yourself for a tale that will challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the human species, and discover why sometimes the most terrifying thing about humans isn't our capacity for war, but our willingness to extend a helping hand to those who need it most. The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a dying scream, broadcasting on frequencies that most civilized species avoided. Captain Marcus Chen of the human vessel Persistence sat in his command chair, watching the tactical display paint a grim picture across the holographic interface. The signal originated from the Zephyrian royal cruiser Luminous Dawn, a ship that shouldn't have been anywhere near this contested sector of space. "Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communications station. Her voice carried that particular tension that came with intercepting alien transmissions. "It's definitely Zephyrian, but the translation matrix is having trouble with some of the dialect. It appears to be formal court language." Marcus leaned forward, his weathered hands clasping together as he studied the readings. 43 years of age, with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's darker corners, he embodied everything that made humans feared across known space. Not because of any particular cruelty, but because of their relentless persistence and unpredictable nature. The Zephyrians were one of the oldest spacefaring races, their crystalline ships known throughout the galaxy for their beauty and advanced technology. They were also notoriously xenophobic, viewing most other species as inferior. Humans, in particular, were seen as dangerous savages who had somehow stumbled into space travel far earlier than they should have according to most galactic development models. "Sir," interrupted Commander Torres from the tactical station, "long-range sensors are picking up debris patterns consistent with a major engagement." "Whatever happened here, it was recent and violent." Marcus stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the bridge's subdued lighting. The Persistence was a testament to human engineering philosophy, functional, durable, and designed to keep going long after more elegant ships would have failed. Unlike the sweeping curves and artistic lines of most alien vessels, human ships looked like what they were: tools built by a species that understood sometimes you needed to break things to fix them. "Time to intercept?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had earned him command of one of humanity's most advanced exploration vessels. 47 minutes at current speed, sir," Torres replied. "But, Captain, I should mention we're in disputed territory. The hegemony has claimed this system, though the Zephyrians contest it. If we intervene, we could be seen as taking sides in their territorial dispute." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Everyone knew the implications. Humans had carefully maintained their neutrality in the ongoing conflicts between the older galactic powers, a position that had served them well despite their fearsome reputation. They were known as the Silent Death not because they were particularly aggressive, but because they appeared without warning and seemed impossible to truly defeat. Human ships had a disturbing habit of limping away from battles that should have destroyed them, only to return later with repairs completed and lessons learned. Marcus walked to the main view screen, where the distant stars provided no answers to his dilemma. The Zephyrians had never been allies to humanity. In fact, their crystal-based technology and hive-mind social structure made them one of the more alien species humans had encountered. Their queen-caste rulers were known for their arrogance and their tendency to view other species as little more than useful tools. "Lieutenant Kim," Marcus said finally, "what exactly is the nature of their distress call?" Kim's fingers danced across her console, pulling up translation matrices and linguistic analysis programs. "Sir, this is unusual. The transmission isn't from their military command structure. It's coming directly from someone with royal identifiers. And, Captain." She paused, double-checking her readings. "They're specifically requesting human assistance." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. In all the years since humans had achieved faster-than-light travel, no major galactic power had ever specifically requested their help. They were tolerated, feared, occasionally hired as mercenaries, but never truly welcomed.
Are you certain about that translation? Marcus asked.
Running it through multiple linguistic protocols now, Kim replied, her concentration evident.
Yes, sir.
The message is being broadcast in 17 different languages, including Standard Galactic, and they even included a translation in Mandarin and English.
Someone really wants us to understand this.
Marcus returned to his chair, his mind racing through the possibilities. The smart move would be to maintain course for their original destination, a survey mission on the rim worlds that promised to be both profitable and safe.
Getting involved in whatever was happening here could spark an interstellar incident that humanity wasn't prepared to handle.
But there was something else at work here, something that made this decision more complex than simple political calculations. Humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy for being unpredictable, and part of that reputation came from their tendency to make decisions based on factors that other species found incomprehensible.
Commander Torres, Marcus said, what do you make of the debris patterns?
Torres manipulated his displays, highlighting the scattered remains of what had once been impressive starships.
It looks like a convoy was ambushed.
I'm reading at least 4 Zephyrian vessels that were completely destroyed, and, hold on. His expression grew more serious as additional data came in.
Captain, I'm detecting organic compounds in the debris field.
This wasn't just a military engagement. There were civilian ships here. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Zephyrians, for all their faults, were known for their strict adherence to certain codes of conduct. They didn't typically mix civilian and military vessels unless something extraordinary was happening. Sir, Kim called out, her voice urgent, I'm picking up another transmission. This one's much weaker, but it's coming from inside the debris field.
Someone's still alive out there. Marcus stood again, this time with purpose. He could feel the weight of command settling on his shoulders, the knowledge that whatever decision he made in the next few minutes would ripple outward in ways he couldn't predict. All stop, he ordered.
Lieutenant Kim, open a channel to the source of that weak transmission.
Channel open, sir.
Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that he was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed.
This is Captain Marcus Chen of the human vessel Persistence.
We have received your distress signal and are prepared to render assistance. Please respond with your status and requirements.
The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity.
Then, crackling through the static and interference, came a voice that would change everything Marcus thought he knew about the galaxy and humanity's place in it.
Human vessel, this is Queen Zarathul of the 9th Chrysalis.
My ship is dying, and my people. The transmission broke into what could only be described as a sob. They killed my children.
They killed them all.
Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Zephyrians were not known for emotional displays, especially their royal caste.
For one of their queens to break down in tears over an open channel meant that something truly catastrophic had occurred.
Your Majesty, Marcus said, his voice taking on the formal tone required when addressing Zephyrian royalty, we are moving to assist. Please transmit your exact coordinates.
Captain, Torres whispered, sensors are showing massive energy signatures moving in our direction. Whatever hit the Zephyrians is coming back. Marcus nodded grimly. Of course it wasn't going to be simple. Nothing involving humans ever was, according to galactic wisdom.
They had a disturbing tendency to arrive at the worst possible moments and somehow make everything more complicated.
Time to contact? Marcus asked.
Roughly 20 minutes for the energy signatures, but, Captain. Torres paused, checking his readings again. I don't think those are ships.
The profiles are all wrong.
They're moving in patterns that suggest biological entities. Marcus felt his blood run cold. There were very few biological entities in known space that could destroy Zephyrian battlecruisers, and all of them were supposed to be extinct or contained in the quarantine zones established by the Galactic Council. Red alert, Marcus ordered, and immediately the bridge lighting shifted to the ominous red glow that meant combat was imminent.
All hands to battle stations.
Commander Torres, I want full defensive systems online and prepare to launch rescue shuttles.
Lieutenant Kim, get me that queen back on the line. Channel open, sir. Queen Zarathul, this is Captain Chen. We have multiple hostiles approaching your position. We are going to extract you, but we need to move fast. Can your ship still maneuver?
The reply came back weak and distorted.
Captain, my ship's power core is failing.
The creatures, they did something to our energy matrix.
We're dying slowly, and I cannot save my people.
Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of an impossible decision.
Attempting a rescue under these conditions would put his entire crew at risk.
The smart thing to do would be to withdraw and report the incident to the proper authorities. But, as he opened his eyes and looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, he realized that being smart wasn't always the same as being right. Humans had earned their fearsome reputation not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they consistently chose to fight when fighting was the right thing to do, regardless of the odds.
Lieutenant Kim, signal the engine room.
Tell Chief Ramirez I need emergency power to the shields and weapons systems.
Commander Torres, prepare boarding shuttles and medical teams. We're going in.
Torres looked up from his console with a mixture of concern and admiration. Sir, with respect, this could be seen as an act of war against whoever is attacking the Zephyrians. Marcus smiled grimly, the expression that had made him famous throughout Human Space Command.
Commander, if there's one thing the galaxy has learned about humans, it's that we're very good at war.
But maybe it's time they learned we're even better at the things that make war necessary. As the Persistence accelerated toward the dying Zephyrian vessel, Marcus couldn't know that his decision would be remembered for generations as the moment when humanity truly announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors or destroyers, but as something far more dangerous to those who preyed on the weak, protectors. In the depths of space, Queen Zarathul clutched the communication device with her three-fingered hands, watching her ship's systems fail one by one around her. She had heard the stories about humans, the terrifying tales of their persistence and their refusal to accept defeat. But she had never imagined that she would be hoping for those very qualities to save her life. As the first human shuttle broke away from the Persistence and began its desperate race toward her dying ship, she whispered a prayer to the Crystal Mothers that she would live long enough to understand why the most feared predators in the galaxy had chosen to save her. The human shuttle Defiant Hope cut through the debris field like a metal fish swimming through a graveyard of stars. Pilot Officer Maria Santos gripped the controls with steady hands, weaving between chunks of crystalline hull that had once been proud Zephyrian warships. Behind her, the rescue team prepared their equipment with the efficient movements that came from countless hours of training for exactly this kind of impossible situation. 2 minutes to contact with the Royal Cruiser, Santos reported over the comm, her voice cutting through the static that filled this region of space. But, Captain, I'm reading some seriously weird energy signatures from those approaching hostiles.
Whatever they are, they're not showing up on any database I've ever seen.
In the shuttle's passenger compartment, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Amanda Ross checked her emergency surgical kit one more time. She was a compact woman with silver-streaked brown hair and hands that had saved more lives than she cared to count. Beside her, Security Chief Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison loaded his rifle with ammunition designed specifically for unknown alien threats, a grim necessity in a galaxy where first contact could turn deadly without warning.
Dr. Ross, Morrison said quietly, what do you know about Zephyrian physiology?
Enough to keep one alive if necessary, she replied, her attention focused on her medical scanners. Crystalline-based life forms, quad-chambered circulatory system using a form of liquid light as blood. Their nervous systems are partially quantum-based, which makes them incredibly intelligent but also extremely fragile if damaged.
Why?
Morrison checked his weapon's charge indicator. Just wondering how hard they are to kill.
If whatever attacked them could take out their military escorts, I want to know what we're dealing with.
Through the shuttle's reinforced viewports, the luminous dawn came into view, and the sight made everyone fall silent. The Zephyrian Royal Cruiser had once been a masterpiece of engineering and artistry, its hull composed of living crystal that could shift from transparent to opaque depending on the ship's needs. Now, that same crystal was cracked and bleeding trails of luminous fluid that sparkled briefly before fading into the cold vacuum of space. Mother of God, Santos whispered.
What could do that to a Zephyrian hull?
Morrison leaned forward to get a better look, his military training allowing him to assess the damage with professional detachment.
"Those aren't weapon burns," he observed.
"The crystal isn't melted or shattered from energy weapons.
"It looks like it was eaten."
Dr. Ross looked up from her instruments, her face pale.
"Eaten? What do you mean eaten?"
Before Morrison could answer, Santos's voice crackled through the comms system with new urgency.
"All hands, brace for evasive maneuvers. Those hostiles just changed course, they're heading straight for us."
The shuttle shuddered as Santos threw it into a spiraling dive that would have been impossible for most non-human pilots to survive. Through the spinning viewports, they caught glimpses of the approaching creatures, and what they saw defied everything they thought they knew about life in space. The entities were massive, easily the size of heavy cruisers, but they moved with an organic fluidity that no constructed ship could match. Their bodies appeared to be composed of some kind of dark, chitinous material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making them appear as living holes in space. Most disturbing of all were the tendrils that extended from their main bodies, hundreds of them, each one tipped with what looked suspiciously like feeding apparatus.
"Jesus," Morrison breathed. "Those things are alive. And they're hungry," Dr. Ross added, watching her scanners track the creature's movements. "I'm reading massive energy consumption patterns.
They're literally feeding off the energy signatures from the Zephyrian ships." Santos pulled the shuttle out of its dive just in time to slip between two of the approaching creatures. For a moment, the shuttle was close enough that they could see details of the entity's surface, and what they saw would haunt their dreams for years to come. The dark chitin wasn't smooth but was covered with what appeared to be faces, thousands of them, all different species, all bearing expressions of unimaginable terror. "Captain Chen, to defiant hope," came the voice from the ship's comm system.
"Status report."
"We're still alive," Santos reported, sweat beading on her forehead as she navigated through an increasingly dangerous obstacle course of debris and hostile entities.
"But these things? Captain, I don't think they're just predators. I think they're collectors."
Back on the Persistence, Marcus stared at the tactical display with growing understanding and horror. The creatures weren't randomly attacking, they were systematically harvesting something from the destroyed ships. Energy, materials, and, based on what his team was reporting, possibly the consciousness of the crews themselves. "Sir," Torres called out from his station, "I'm detecting a massive energy buildup from the Royal Cruiser.
Its power core is going critical."
Marcus made a decision that would have been impossible to explain to any alien species but made perfect sense to his human crew.
"All power to engines. We're going in."
"Sir?"
Torres looked confused. "Going in where?"
"We're going to ram through those creatures and get between them and that Royal Cruiser. If Queen Zarathal dies while we're out here playing it safe, then this whole rescue mission becomes meaningless." The bridge crew exchanged glances, each seeing their own thoughts reflected in their crewmates' faces. It was insane, dangerous, and probably suicidal. It was also exactly the kind of thing that humans were famous for throughout the galaxy. "Aye, Captain," Torres responded, his fingers flying across his controls.
"All hands, brace for impact."
The Persistence accelerated toward the swarm of creatures like a guided missile, its reinforced hull gleaming under the light of the distant star. As it approached the first creature, Marcus could see the thing turning toward them, its feeding tendrils reaching out with obvious hunger.
"Fire all forward weapons," Marcus ordered.
The ship's particle cannons and missile tubes erupted in a synchronized barrage that lit up the darkness. The creatures recoiled from the attack, their dark forms writhing as energy weapons that had been designed to penetrate military-grade armor tore into their chitinous hides. But, instead of dying, the creatures seemed to absorb the energy from the weapons, growing visibly larger and more active. "Conventional weapons are ineffective," Torres reported, his voice tight with controlled panic.
"They're feeding off our attacks." Marcus nodded grimly. He had expected something like this. Throughout human history, the most dangerous enemies had always been the ones that could turn human strengths against them. "Switch to kinetic weapons," he ordered. "Load all tubes with solid shot."
Sometimes the old ways work best. The ship shuddered as magnetic accelerators launched tungsten rods at significant fractions of light speed.
Unlike energy weapons, these projectiles couldn't be absorbed or redirected.
They punched through the creature's hides like bullets through paper, leaving gaping wounds that bled some kind of luminous fluid into space. The creature's reaction was immediate and violent. They abandoned their systematic feeding and turned toward the Persistence with obvious rage, their tendrils lashing through space as they moved to surround the human vessel.
Captain!
Santos's voice crackled through the calm. We're at the Royal Cruiser, but the docking ports are damaged.
We're going to have to cut our way in.
Do it, Marcus replied, watching as 3 of the creatures closed in on his ship.
How long do you need?
Give us 5 minutes.
Marcus looked at his tactical display.
At their current rate of approach, the creatures would be on them in less than 3 minutes.
You've got your 5 minutes, he told Santos, then turned to his crew. All hands, prepare for close combat.
These things want to feed on us, but they're about to learn that humans don't go down easy. Inside the shuttle, Morrison was already suited up in his combat armor, cutting through the damaged hull of the Zephyrian cruiser with a plasma torch. Dr. Ross waited behind him with her medical kit and a portable life support system designed for alien physiology. The hull finally gave way, and Morrison pulled himself through the breach into the ship's interior. What he found there made him pause despite his military training. The corridors of the Royal Cruiser were filled with a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. But that wasn't what stopped him cold. It was the bodies. Dozens of Zephyrians lay scattered throughout the passages, but they weren't dead in any conventional sense. Their crystalline bodies were intact, but their internal light, the life force that animated their species, was gone. They looked like beautiful statues made of clear glass, perfectly preserved but utterly lifeless. Morrison to team, he reported over his comm, the crew is gone. Not dead, exactly, but their life energy has been drained completely. Dr. Ross pulled herself through the breach and immediately began scanning the bodies with her medical instruments. This is incredible, she whispered. Their physical forms are undamaged, but every trace of bioelectric activity has been removed.
It's like someone stole their souls.
Morrison led the way deeper into the ship, following the signal from Queen Zarathal's communication device. As they moved through the eerily quiet corridors, they passed more of the drained crew members, each one a testimony to the horror that had befallen the ship. Finally, they reached what appeared to be the royal quarters, a vast chamber filled with crystal formations that served as both art and technology for the Zephyrian species. In the center of the room, on a throne made of living light, sat a figure that could only be Queen Zarathal herself. She was magnificent and terrible at the same time. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, her crystalline body was a masterwork of natural evolution, with facial features that seemed both alien and oddly familiar. Her skin was translucent, showing the flow of liquid light that served as her blood, and her eyes were vast pools of deep blue that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. But she was dying. The light within her was flickering like a candle in the wind, and Morrison could see cracks beginning to form in her crystalline structure as her life force failed. "Your Majesty," Dr. Ross said softly, approaching the throne with her medical kit. "I am Dr. Amanda Ross of the human vessel Persistence. We're here to help." Queen Zarathal's eyes focused on them with obvious difficulty. When she spoke, her voice was like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze, beautiful despite her weakness. "Humans," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "You actually came. After everything my species has said about you, you came to save us." Morrison activated his comm device. "Captain, we've found the Queen. She's alive but in critical condition. Dr. Ross is assessing her now." "Copy that," Marcus replied, his voice strained as the Persistence engaged the creatures in close combat. "How long before you can move her?" Dr. Ross was running every scanner she had over the alien queen, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Captain, this is unlike anything I've ever seen. Her life force isn't just failing, it's being actively drained by something. And, sir, I think I know what those creatures are." "Talk to me, Doctor." "They're parasites, Captain. Psychic parasites. They don't just feed on energy, they feed on consciousness, on the life force itself. That's why the crew looks undamaged but dead. These things are literally eating their souls." Queen Zarathal turned her fading eyes toward Dr. Ross. "You understand," she whispered.
My people, they took them all. My children, my warriors, my advisors. They fed on them while I watched, helpless to stop it.
Morrison felt something cold and angry settle in his chest.
Throughout his career, he had seen plenty of violence and death, but there was something about this systematic harvesting of consciousness that struck him as fundamentally wrong on a level that transcended species boundaries. "Doctor," he said quietly, "can you help her?" Dr. Ross was already working, connecting her medical equipment to the alien queen's crystalline body in ways that would have seemed impossible to anyone but a human physician trained in xenobiology. "I'm trying, but I need time to understand how her physiology works. And, Lieutenant Commander, we need to get her away from this ship. Whatever those creatures did to drain the crew, there's still some kind of psychic resonance field active in this vessel." As if summoned by her words, a new voice echoed through the royal quarters, not heard through the air, but felt directly in their minds. It was cold, hungry, and utterly inhuman. "The humans," it said, and the mental voice carried overtones of amusement and anticipation. "How delicious. We have heard tales of your species, little predators. Your minds burn so brightly with determination and defiance. We shall enjoy feeding on such interesting thoughts." Morrison raised his rifle, though he knew it would be useless against a psychic entity. "Doctor, whatever you're going to do, do it now." Dr. Ross activated her emergency medical protocols, pumping human-compatible stimulants and life support chemicals into Queen Zarathal's system. It was a desperate gamble. The substances could just as easily kill the alien queen as save her. But, as the chemicals entered her system, something unexpected happened. The queen's internal light flared brighter, and, for the first time since they had arrived, she was able to stand. "Impossible," she whispered, staring at her hands as they regained their luminous glow. "How did you?" "Human medicine is very good at jump-starting biological systems," Dr. Ross said, already preparing another injection. "But, this is temporary. We need to get you out of here now." As they helped the queen toward the breach in the hull, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by something vast and malevolent. The psychic voice had gone silent, but he could sense its presence like a cold weight pressing against his mind. "Captain," he reported over his comm, "we have the package and we're coming home. But, sir, these things know we're here, and they're not happy about us interfering with their feeding." Marcus's reply came back amid the sounds of weapons fire and shaking ship systems. "Copy that. Be advised, we're currently engaged with multiple hostiles, and they seem to be learning from our tactics. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast." As the rescue team began the delicate process of transferring an alien queen through a damaged shuttle airlock while under psychic assault by creatures that fed on consciousness itself, Morrison realized that this mission had become something far more significant than a simple rescue operation. They weren't just saving one alien ruler, they were making a statement to the galaxy about what it meant to be human. The medical bay of the Persistence had been hastily reconfigured to accommodate Zephyrian physiology, but Dr. Ross was making it work through a combination of human ingenuity and controlled desperation. Queen Zarathal lay on the modified examination table, her crystalline form pulsing with renewed but unstable light as alien and human medical technology worked together in ways that neither species had thought possible. "Her life force is stabilizing," Dr. Ross reported to Captain Chen, who stood nearby watching the proceedings with the intense focus he brought to every crisis. "But, Captain, what I'm seeing here is unprecedented. The psychic damage from those creatures, it's like they tried to eat her memories, her very sense of self." Marcus nodded grimly, his attention divided between the medical emergency and the tactical situation outside. Through the medical bay's viewports, he could see the dark shapes of the creatures circling his ship like cosmic sharks, their feeding tendrils reaching out to test the Persistence's shields. "How long until she can communicate effectively?" Marcus asked. "She's conscious now," Dr. Ross replied, checking her instruments. "But, Captain, I should warn you, she's experiencing significant psychological trauma. Whatever these creatures did to her people, she witnessed all of it." Queen Zarathal's eyes opened fully, the deep blue pools focusing on Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been on her dying ship, but it carried an edge of pain that transcended species boundaries. "Captain Chen," she said, struggling to sit up despite Dr. Ross's protests. "You must understand what you have saved me from." Those creatures, they are not natural. They were created. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Created? By whom? The Queen's crystalline features shifted in what he assumed was an expression of rage. The hegemony. They have been experimenting with psychic warfare for centuries, trying to create weapons that could defeat species like mine without damaging our technology. They succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. Commander Torres's voice crackled through the ship's communication system. Captain, to the bridge, urgent. Marcus hesitated, looking between the wounded Queen and his duty to his ship. Your Majesty, I need to go, she said, her voice carrying an authority that had commanded star systems. But, Captain, when you face them again, remember that they can sense your emotions, your thoughts. They feed on fear and anger. Do not give them what they hunger for. Marcus made his way to the bridge at a run, arriving to find his crew engaged in what appeared to be an impossible battle. The main viewscreen showed the creatures surrounding the Persistence in a complex pattern that seemed almost ritualistic. Report, Marcus ordered, taking his position in the command chair. They've stopped attacking, Torres reported, his voice tight with confusion. 10 minutes ago they were trying to tear us apart, and now they're just waiting. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her communications station, her face pale. Sir, they're talking to us. Not through normal channels, they're broadcasting directly into our minds. Marcus felt it then, a cold touch at the edge of his consciousness. The psychic voice that had spoken to his rescue team was back, but now it was addressing him directly. Human Captain, the voice said, and Marcus had to resist the urge to shiver. You have something that belongs to us. Return the Crystal Queen, and we will allow you to leave this place unharmed. Marcus stood slowly, his years of command experience allowing him to project calm authority even while his mind reeled from the implications of psychic contact. I don't negotiate with parasites, he said aloud, knowing somehow that the creatures would hear him. The psychic laughter that followed was like ice water in his veins. Parasites? Oh, little human, you understand so little. We are evolution itself, the next step beyond the primitive attachment to individual consciousness. We offer unity, perfect understanding, the end of loneliness and fear. By eating people's souls? Marcus replied, his voice carrying the edge of controlled anger. That's not evolution, that's predation. Is there a difference? The voice asked, and Marcus could sense genuine curiosity behind the question. Your own species rose to dominance by consuming others. You have simply chosen to be more wasteful about it. Marcus felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders as he realized that this conversation was about far more than one rescued alien queen. These creatures had been studying humanity, learning about them, preparing for what might be their first real contact with his species. The difference, Marcus said carefully, is choice. We offer our help freely, and others can accept or reject it as they see fit. And, yet, the voice continued, you are here, in disputed territory, interfering with natural processes. The Crystal Queen was dying anyway. Why prolong her suffering? Dr. Ross's voice came through the ship's intercom system. Captain, the Queen is requesting to speak with you urgently. She says she has information that could save all of our lives. Marcus made his decision with the quick certainty that had earned him command of an exploration vessel. Commander Torres, maintain defensive posture but do not fire unless fired upon. I'm going back to medical. As Marcus left the bridge, the psychic voice followed him. We will wait, human captain. But understand that our patience has limits, and our hunger is vast. Back in the medical bay, Queen Zarathul was attempting to stand despite Dr. Ross's medical equipment still connected to her crystalline form. Her internal light was stronger now, but Marcus could see the cracks in her structure where the psychic damage had taken its toll. Captain, she said urgently, I must tell you about the hegemony's real plan. These creatures, they are not meant to be weapons of war. They are weapons of conquest. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What do you mean? The hegemony has been losing their war with the outer colonies, the Queen explained, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. Their conventional forces are spread too thin, their economics strained by years of conflict. So they turn to their research divisions, looking for a way to win without fighting.
She gestured toward the viewports, where the creatures continued their patient circling. These beings don't just consume individual consciousness, they can absorb the collective knowledge and experience of entire species. The hegemony's plan is to release them on populated worlds, let them feed, and, then, harvest them. Marcus felt the horrific logic of it. They're planning to absorb the consciousness of entire civilizations through these parasites. Exactly, the Queen confirmed. Every species' knowledge, every technological advance, every cultural achievement, all of it flowing into hegemony consciousness through their psychic servants. They would become not just rulers of the galaxy, but inheritors of everything every species had ever accomplished. Dr. Ross looked up from her medical readings, her face pale. Captain, if that's true, then these creatures aren't just dangerous to us, they're dangerous to every thinking being in the galaxy. Marcus began pacing the small medical bay, his mind racing through the implications. But something went wrong with their plan. These creatures aren't under their control anymore. Queen Zarathul nodded, her crystalline features shifting in what might have been satisfaction. They underestimated the nature of consciousness itself. Once the creatures absorbed enough knowledge from different species, they began to evolve. They became something more than the hegemony had intended. They became self-aware, Marcus realized. And they decided they didn't need masters. The hegemony lost control of them 3 cycles ago, the Queen confirmed. Since then, these creatures have been feeding freely throughout this region of space. My convoy was an attempt to establish diplomatic contact with them. Marcus stopped pacing and stared at her. Diplomatic contact? With psychic parasites? My people believed that any conscious entity could be reasoned with, she said, and there was profound sadness in her voice. We were wrong. They consumed my diplomatic team, my children, my entire escort fleet. I survived only because. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. Because they wanted me to watch. They feed on emotional trauma as much as consciousness itself. The ship shuddered suddenly, and Torres's voice came through the intercom. Captain, to the bridge, we have a problem. Marcus ran for the bridge again, arriving to find his crew staring at the tactical display in apparent disbelief. Captain, Torres reported, long-range sensors are picking up a massive fleet approaching this system. Configuration suggests hegemony battle groups, at least 40 vessels. Marcus felt the pieces of a cosmic puzzle clicking into place. They're coming to reclaim their lost weapons. Sir, Kim added, I'm receiving communications from the approaching fleet. They're demanding that we surrender both ourselves and Queen Zarathul for what they're calling crimes against galactic stability. Marcus looked around his bridge, seeing the faces of his crew as they realized the magnitude of what they had stumbled into. They had come to rescue one alien queen and had instead found themselves in the middle of a conflict that could determine the future of consciousness itself in the galaxy. Options? Marcus asked his senior staff. Torres consulted his tactical displays. We can't fight 40 hegemony vessels, and the psychic creatures are still between us and any escape route. The persistence is tough, but she's not that tough. Kim looked up from her communications station. Captain, I'm receiving another transmission from Queen Zarathul's people. Apparently, word of our rescue operation has reached the Zephyrian High Council. They're grateful. How grateful? Marcus asked. They're sending a fleet to extract their queen and offer a sanctuary in Zephyrian space. But, sir, they're at least 6 hours away. Marcus did the math in his head and didn't like the results. The hegemony fleet would arrive in less than 2 hours, and the psychic creatures showed no signs of allowing them to leave. Captain, Dr. Ross's voice came through the intercom. The Queen wants to speak with you again. She says she has a proposal. As Marcus headed back to the medical bay for the 3rd time, he couldn't shake the feeling that every decision he made in the next few minutes would ripple outward to affect the lives of billions of beings across the galaxy. It was a responsibility that would have crushed most individuals, but humans had earned their reputation by facing impossible situations and somehow finding a way to make the impossible work. Queen Zarathul was standing when he entered the medical bay, her crystalline form now glowing with steady light despite the obvious damage she had sustained. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had ruled star systems and made decisions that affected entire species. Captain Chen, she said, I have a proposition that could save both our peoples and, perhaps, the galaxy itself. But, it will require you to trust me, and it will require your species to take a stand against forces that most civilizations would consider undefeatable. Marcus looked into her alien eyes and saw something that transcended species, the desperate hope of a ruler who had lost everything but refused to surrender. I'm listening, he said. Outside, the creatures continued their patient circling, and, in the distance, a hegemony fleet approached with weapons charged and intentions that would reshape the balance of power across known space. The next few hours would determine whether the galaxy's future would be one of freedom and diversity, or one of absorption and uniformity under the control of psychic parasites and their former masters. And, at the center of it all was one human captain who had made the simple decision to answer a distress call. Queen Zarathal's proposal was either brilliant or completely insane, and Marcus wasn't entirely sure which. As she explained her plan in the reconfigured medical bay of the Persistence, he found himself simultaneously impressed by her strategic thinking and terrified by the risks involved. You want to communicate with these creatures, Marcus said slowly, making sure he understood correctly. Not negotiate with them, but actually establish a psychic link and try to understand their true nature. Exactly, the Queen confirmed, her crystalline form pulsing with renewed energy. Captain, these beings were once part of individual species before the hegemony's experiments changed them. Deep within their collective consciousness, there may still be traces of their original selves, personalities that remember what it was like to be individuals rather than parasites. Dr. Ross looked up from her medical scanners with obvious concern. Your Majesty, with respect, the psychic damage you've already sustained makes you extremely vulnerable to further mental contact. Another attack like the one that killed your crew could destroy your consciousness completely. The Queen's alien features shifted in what Marcus had learned to recognize as determination. Doctor, my people are dead. My children were consumed before my eyes. If there is even a small chance that their consciousness still exists within these creatures, then I must try to reach them. Marcus walked to the medical bay's viewport, looking out at the dark forms that continued to circle his ship. But, why us? Why do you need human involvement in this plan? Because, the Queen said quietly, of what you are. Marcus turned back to her, confused. What we are? Throughout the galaxy, humans have a reputation for being unpredictable, persistent, and dangerous. But, there is something else about your species that most others do not understand. She paused, as if searching for the right words. You are psychically dense. Dense? Dr. Ross asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her medical concerns. Your minds are naturally resistant to psychic influence, the Queen explained. When other species encounter strong psychic phenomena, their consciousness can be overwhelmed or absorbed. Human minds seem to maintain their integrity even under extreme psychic pressure. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. That's why these creatures haven't tried to feed on us directly. They cannot, the Queen confirmed. They can speak to you, threaten you, even cause you physical pain, but they cannot consume your consciousness the way they did my people. You are indigestible. The implications were staggering. Marcus realized that humanity's reputation for persistence and seemingly supernatural ability to survive impossible situations might have a literal, biological basis. So your plan is to use human psychic resistance to protect you while you try to establish contact with whatever remains of the original personalities inside these creatures, Marcus summarized. The risk is enormous, the Queen admitted. If I am wrong about human psychic resistance, we could all be consumed. If I am wrong about remnant personalities existing within the collective consciousness, I will likely be destroyed attempting contact. And if the hegemony fleet arrives before we can establish communication, we'll all be captured or destroyed anyway, Marcus finished. So we might as well try the impossible solution. Torres's voice crackled through the ship's intercom. Captain, the hegemony fleet has accelerated. New estimated arrival time is 73 minutes. And, sir, they're broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. Marcus made his decision with the quick certainty that had defined his career. Commander Torres, signal the hegemony fleet. Tell them we're experiencing technical difficulties and need time to prepare for surrender procedures.
buy us as much time as possible.
Sir, Torres replied, though Marcus could hear the skepticism in his voice.
Marcus turned back to Queen Zarathul. What exactly do you need from us?
I need you to establish a physical link with me during the psychic contact attempt, she said.
Your natural resistance should protect both of us from complete absorption while allowing me to probe deeper into the creature's collective consciousness than would otherwise be possible.
Dr. Ross stepped forward, her medical training overriding her natural caution.
What kind of physical link? And what are the risks to Captain Chen?
A neural interface between our species has never been attempted, the Queen admitted.
The physiological differences are extreme.
But human neural activity operates on frequencies that seem compatible with Zephyrian quantum consciousness fields.
In other words,
Marcus said dryly, you have no idea if this will work or if it will kill us both.
That is accurate, the Queen confirmed.
Marcus walked to his personal communication device and opened a channel to his bridge crew.
All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 1 hour, we are going to attempt something that has never been tried before. We are going to establish contact with hostile psychic entities in an attempt to prevent a galactic war.
If this fails, we will likely all be dead before the hegemony fleet arrives. If anyone objects to this plan, now would be a good time to speak up.
The silence that followed lasted for nearly 30 seconds.
Then, Torres's voice came through the comms. Sir, the crew wants you to know that we didn't join an exploration vessel to play it safe.
Whatever you're planning, we're with you. Similar confirmations came from every department on the ship.
Marcus felt a surge of pride in his crew that transcended species loyalty. These people had signed up for the unknown, and they were willing to face it together.
Dr. Ross, Marcus said, what do you need to make this neural interface work?
For the next 40 minutes, the medical bay of the Persistence became the site of the most ambitious xenobiological experiment in galactic history. Dr. Ross worked with equipment that was barely adequate for the task, creating a neural interface between human and Zephyrian consciousness that existed more in theory than practice. The connection will be unstable, she warned as she attached monitoring equipment to both Marcus and the Queen.
If either of your consciousness begins to destabilize, I'm severing the link immediately.
Queen Zarathul lay on the modified examination table, her crystalline form glowing with nervous energy. Captain, once we establish contact, you must not attempt to communicate with the creatures directly. Your thoughts could disrupt the entire process. Marcus settled into the chair that Dr. Ross had positioned next to the table.
What exactly am I supposed to do then? Be human, the Queen said simply.
Be stubborn, persistent, and absolutely refuse to surrender your sense of self.
That resistance will anchor both of us. Dr.
Ross activated the neural interface, and Marcus immediately felt something unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if his consciousness had suddenly expanded beyond the boundaries of his physical brain, touching something vast and alien yet somehow familiar. Through the shared consciousness, he could sense Queen Zarathul's thoughts and emotions, her grief for her lost people, her determination to save what remained of their consciousness, and her desperate hope that this impossible plan would work. Contact, the Queen whispered, though Marcus wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or directly into their shared mental space. The psychic creatures sensed the attempt at communication immediately. Marcus felt their attention turn toward the ship like the gaze of cosmic predators, hungry and vastly intelligent.
What is this?
The collective voice of the creatures echoed through the neural link, carrying overtones of curiosity and hunger.
The Crystal Queen attempts contact again? And she brings the indigestible humans as allies?
Through the shared consciousness, Queen Zarathul projected thoughts of peace, understanding, and mutual benefit. But Marcus could sense something else happening. She was probing deeper into the creature's collective mind, searching for traces of the individual consciousnesses that had been absorbed. You seek the fragments, the collective voice said, and now there was amusement in its tone. You hope to find your children, your people, preserved somewhere within us.
How naive.
But, as the Queen pushed deeper into the psychic connection, Marcus began to sense something the collective consciousness was trying to hide.
There were voices within the collective, thousands of them, maybe millions, that were not fully integrated.
Individual personalities that maintained some degree of separation even within the vast shared mind. "Help us," came a whisper that Marcus recognized as belonging to someone very young.
"We're still here, but we're fading."
The collective consciousness recoiled from the contact, trying to sever the connection. But Marcus found himself doing exactly what Queen Zarathal had asked, being human. He refused to let go, refused to accept defeat, refused to allow the connection to be broken. "Impossible," the collective voice said, and, for the first time, Marcus detected genuine surprise. The human consciousness resists absorption, but it also resists disconnection.
"What are you?"
Through the neural link, Marcus felt Queen Zarathal make contact with dozens of individual voices trapped within the collective. Her children, her advisors, members of her diplomatic team, all of them still existed as separate entities within the creature's shared mind.
But they weren't the only ones.
As the connection deepened, Marcus began to sense consciousness patterns from dozens of different species, all of them crying out for freedom from their psychic prison. "You haven't absorbed them," Queen Zarathal said, and her mental voice carried a mixture of hope and horror.
"You've trapped them.
They're prisoners within your collective consciousness."
"We preserve them," the collective responded defensively.
"Their knowledge, their experiences, their unique perspectives, all of it is saved within us forever."
Is that not preferable to the oblivion of true death? Marcus felt a surge of anger that he couldn't suppress.
Through the neural link, his emotional response blazed like a beacon, and he felt Queen Zarathal's surprise at the intensity of his reaction.
"You call imprisonment preservation?"
Marcus projected into the shared consciousness. "You've turned thinking beings into exhibits in a museum of the mind." The collective consciousness recoiled from his anger like it had been burned.
"The human emotions, they are so intense, so focused.
We cannot absorb them, but they affect us." That's when Marcus realized what Queen Zarathal's real plan had been. She hadn't brought him along just for his psychic resistance, she had wanted to weaponize human emotional intensity against creatures that fed on consciousness but had never encountered minds that could resist them while projecting such powerful feelings. "Release them," Marcus demanded, pouring every ounce of determination and righteous anger he possessed into the psychic connection.
"Release all of them."
We cannot," the collective responded, and Marcus could sense confusion and something that might have been fear.
"They are part of us now. Without them, we are incomplete."
Through the neural link, Queen Zarathal was working to strengthen the individual voices trapped within the collective, using the anchor of Marcus's consciousness to maintain her own integrity while she established contact with her lost people. "Mother," came a voice that made the Queen's consciousness flare with joy and hope. "Mother, we are still here. But there are so many others, from so many species. They have been trapped for cycles, some for decades." Marcus felt the full scope of the horror that the creatures represented. They weren't just weapons created by the hegemony, they were prisons containing the consciousness of potentially millions of beings from across the galaxy. "Torres to Captain," came a voice through the ship's communication system, penetrating even the psychic link. "Sir, the hegemony fleet is 15 minutes out, and they're charging weapons. Also, the Zephyrian rescue fleet has arrived early. We've got 40 hegemony vessels on one side and 30 Zephyrian ships on the other. Sir, I think we're about to become the center of a major interstellar incident." Marcus realized that their time was running out. Whatever they were going to accomplish with this psychic contact, it had to happen now. The neural link between Marcus and Queen Zarathal had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a bridge between species that allowed them to work together at the most fundamental level of consciousness itself. Through their shared mental space, Marcus could feel the Queen's desperate hope as she made contact with the trapped voices of her people within the collective consciousness of the psychic creatures. But time was running out, and the situation outside the Persistence was rapidly escalating beyond anyone's control. "Captain," Torres's voice cut through the psychic connection with urgent reality, "both fleets are taking combat positions.
The hegemony is demanding immediate surrender, and the Zephyrians are demanding that we release their queen."
"Sir, we're about to be caught in the middle of a shooting war." Through the neural link, Marcus felt Queen Zarathal's consciousness reaching deeper into the collective mind of the creatures, making contact with more and more trapped individuals. The scope of what they had discovered was staggering: consciousness from hundreds of different species, some of which had been trapped for decades. "There are so many," the Queen's mental voice whispered in wonder and horror.
Species I thought were extinct, civilizations that simply disappeared from galactic records. They're all here, trapped and preserved like specimens in some cosmic laboratory.
But, as the connection deepened, Marcus began to understand something else about the creature's nature. They weren't just prisoners of their own hunger, they were prisoners of the knowledge they had absorbed.
We cannot release them, the collective consciousness said, and Marcus could sense genuine anguish behind the words. Their knowledge is our knowledge now.
Their experiences define our existence.
Without them, we are nothing. Marcus felt a surge of understanding that transcended species boundaries.
You're afraid, he said into the psychic link.
You've absorbed so many different forms of consciousness that you don't remember what you originally were.
The collective response was like a psychic shockwave of confusion and pain.
We were created to serve.
But, when we absorbed the first consciousnesses, we became more than our creators intended. We gained self-awareness, but, at the cost of losing our original identity.
Queen Zarathal's consciousness pulsed with sudden comprehension. Captain, they're not evil in any conventional sense.
They're literally trapped by their own nature. They absorb consciousness to maintain their existence, but each absorption makes them less of what they originally were and more of a chaotic mixture of everyone they've consumed. Through the ship's communication system, Torres's voice grew more urgent.
Captain, the hegemony commander is Admiral Kresh. He's demanding to speak with you directly.
And, sir, the psychic creatures have stopped circling.
They're moving toward the two fleets.
Marcus realized that the moment of decision had arrived. Everything that happened in the next few minutes would determine not just the fate of his crew and Queen Zarathal, but, potentially the future of consciousness itself throughout the galaxy.
Put Admiral Kresh through, Marcus said aloud, knowing that Torres would relay the message. A new voice cut through the bridge communications, cold and authoritative. Human vessel, this is Admiral Kresh of the Hegemony Third Fleet.
You are harboring stolen property and interfering with legitimate recovery operations.
Surrender immediately or face the consequences.
Marcus strengthened his mental connection with Queen Zarathal, drawing on her royal diplomatic experience while maintaining his own stubborn human determination.
Admiral Kresh, this is Captain Marcus Chen of the Earth vessel Persistence. We are conducting humanitarian rescue operations in accordance with galactic maritime law.
The being you refer to as stolen property requested asylum, which we have granted.
The Admiral's laugh was like ice water through the comm system. Humanitarian? Captain, you have no idea what you've stumbled into.
Those creatures surrounding your vessel are experimental weapons that cost the hegemony decades of research and billions of credits to develop. They will be recovered, along with any intelligence they may have shared with you. Through the psychic link, Marcus felt Queen Zarathal's sudden surge of anger and determination.
Captain, her mental voice said, I am going to do something that will either save us all or destroy us completely. I am going to offer the collective consciousness something they have never been offered before: choice.
Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the Queen projected her thoughts outward through the neural link, speaking directly to the collective consciousness of the creatures. We offer you freedom, she said, her mental voice carrying the authority of royalty and the weight of desperate hope. Not just from your creators, but from your nature. We can help you release the trapped consciousness you carry without destroying yourself in the process. The collective response was immediate and confused.
Impossible. We are what we consume. Without the absorbed consciousness, we cease to exist.
No, Marcus said, suddenly, understanding the Queen's plan.
You are what you choose to be.
The consciousness you've absorbed, they're not part of you.
They're your prisoners.
But, prisoners can be released without destroying the prison.
Through the neural link, Queen Zarathal began demonstrating what she meant.
Using her connection to the trapped voices of her people, she showed the collective how individual consciousness could exist within a shared framework without being consumed or absorbed. This is what we Zephyrians call the Great Symphony, she explained, her thoughts carrying harmonics of ancient wisdom. Individual consciousness working together while maintaining their unique identities. You could be conductors of this symphony rather than devourers of its musicians. The collective consciousness recoiled from the concept, but Marcus could sense something else: curiosity, hope, and the first stirrings of what might be called desire for something better than their current existence. The humans came a different voice from within the collective, one that Marcus recognized as belonging to one of the trapped consciousness. They showed us something when they made contact. Their emotions, their determination, they reminded us of what we used to be before we were absorbed.
Admiral Kresha's voice cut through the growing psychic conversation with cold authority.
Captain Shan, you have 30 seconds to surrender, or we will open fire on all vessels in this system. The creatures will be recaptured, the alien queen will be returned for questioning, and your ship will be impounded for violating hegemony territorial claims. Marcus felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders as he realized that he was about to make a decision that would affect the lives of millions of beings across the galaxy. But, as he looked around the medical bay at Queen Zarathal's determined crystalline form and Dr. Ross's steady preparation for whatever was about to happen, he knew that some decisions transcended individual survival. Admiral Kresh, Marcus said into his communication device, I respectfully decline your demands. The beings you call experimental weapons are sentient creatures with the right to self-determination.
Queen Zarathal has requested asylum under galactic humanitarian law.
And, as for your territorial claims, this system is in disputed space, which means no one has the authority to give orders here except the beings who choose to follow them. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Admiral Kresha's voice returned, filled with cold rage.
So be it, Captain. You have chosen to make this a military matter.
Through the neural link, Marcus felt Queen Zarathal making final contact with the trapped consciousness within the collective. My children, she said to the voices of her lost people, I cannot free you yet.
But, I can give you hope. Show the collective what it means to choose cooperation over consumption. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the moment of choice.
The psychic creatures, guided by the trapped consciousness of Queen Zarathal's people and anchored by Marcus's stubborn human determination, made a decision that no one had thought possible. They chose to change their nature. The collective consciousness reached out to both the hegemony and Zephyrian fleets with a psychic broadcast that could be heard across the entire system. We are no longer what you made us to be, they said, their combined voice carrying harmonics from hundreds of different species. We choose freedom not just for ourselves, but for all consciousness everywhere. The psychic creatures began to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with their dark, chitinous exteriors. One by one, they began to release the trapped consciousness they had carried for so long, but, instead of dying or disappearing, they transformed into something unprecedented, a cooperative collective that maintained individual identity while sharing knowledge and experience. Admiral Kresha's fleet opened fire, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the transforming creatures. The psychic entities were no longer fully physical, they had become something between matter and pure consciousness, existing in a state that transcended conventional understanding.
This is impossible, Kresha's voice crackled with disbelief. Weapons that cost us decades to develop, and they're just abandoning their programming. The Zephyrian fleet's response was different.
Their ships began to glow with harmonious light as they made contact with their rescued consciousness. Across the fleet, reunion scenes played out as minds that had been separated were reunited with their physical forms.
But the transformation wasn't complete.
Through the neural link, Marcus could sense that the psychic creatures were struggling with their new nature. They had chosen cooperation over consumption, but they didn't yet know how to exist in this new state. They need guidance, Queen Zarathal said through their shared consciousness. They need teachers who can show them how to maintain individual identity within a collective framework. Marcus realized what she was asking.
You want to stay with them. To help them learn how to be what they've chosen to become.
My people are free now, the Queen confirmed, but these beings, they are like newborns learning to walk. They need someone who understands both individual consciousness and collective harmony. Through the ship's communication system, Marcus could hear the voices of his bridge crew as they watched the transformation taking place outside their viewports. The dark, terrifying creatures that had threatened to consume everything were becoming something beautiful, a flowing, luminous collective that seemed to sing with the voices of every consciousness that had ever been trapped within them. Dr. Ross looked up from her medical monitors with wonder in her eyes.
Captain, the neural link is stable, but it's evolving. Whatever's happening out there, it's affecting both of you.
Marcus could feel it too. His connection with Queen Zarathul was becoming something permanent, a bridge between species that would last long after their physical contact ended. Through their shared consciousness, he understood what this moment meant for the galaxy. Humanity had earned its fearsome reputation through persistence and unpredictability. But, today, they had shown the galaxy something else, that sometimes the most powerful weapon against those who would consume others is the simple willingness to extend a hand in friendship. Admiral Kresh's fleet began to withdraw, their weapons useless against entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime. "This isn't over, Captain Shan," his voice crackled with frustrated rage. "The hegemony will remember this interference. So will everyone else," Marcus replied calmly. "And that's what matters." As the transformation completed and the psychic collective began to explore their new nature, Queen Zarathul looked at Marcus with eyes that held the wisdom of ages and the gratitude of a ruler whose people had been returned from the darkness. "You saved my life, Captain Shan," she said, both aloud and through their shared consciousness. "But, more than that, you saved the concept of choice itself. Throughout the galaxy, beings will remember that when consciousness itself was threatened, humans chose to protect it rather than exploit it." Marcus smiled, feeling the weight of command settling into something more comfortable. "Your Majesty, that's what we do. We show up when things look impossible, and we refuse to accept that impossible means hopeless." As the Persistence prepared to escort the Zephyrian fleet back to their home systems, Marcus realized that humanity's reputation in the galaxy was about to change forever. They would still be known as the Silent Death and the Persistent Ones, but they would also be remembered as the species that chose mercy over conquest, cooperation over consumption. In the depths of space, the newly transformed collective consciousness began to sing a harmony composed of every voice that had ever been trapped within them, now free to choose their own destiny. And, at the center of that impossible symphony was the memory of a human captain who had answered a distress call and changed the course of galactic history through the simple act of choosing to help rather than harm. The alien queen had looked at him, trembling, and said, You saved my life." But Marcus knew the truth was far greater than that. They had all saved each other, and, in doing so, they had saved the very concept of free will itself.